Morning, church. How are we all today? Welcome, children, especially you guys, because I'm here to speak to you today in today's family service. Mary asked me to speak, a couple months ago now, maybe, if I would lead today, and I really debated about what I wanted to speak about. I did think about some ways that I could bring Arlo to church again to make use out of the lion's mane at bottom, but I think, all those YouTube views, the fame's gone to his head, and I was unwilling to meet the demands of his appearance fee today, so he's stuck at home. But I continued to deliberate over today's topic for about 4 weeks until I had confirmation last Sunday on what I should speak about. So I think over the last few weeks I've attended a lot of different Christian meetings and listened to testimonies of God's goodness, especially in the most challenging circumstances. I went through to the Capstone Centre a few weeks ago and I listened to the testimony of a man called Mark Hind, who had doctors tell his wife that he wouldn't make it, and the best thing to do for him was to turn off his life support machines and let him die. He'd contracted COVID back in 2021, and his story's quite impressive. The testimony is online, but God had other plans for Mark, and through the power of prayer and faith of the church body across the world, his condition changed to the point doctors described his turnaround as a miracle. Mark was written off and given a no-hope diagnosis, but the faithfulness of those people who lifted Mark up 24 hours a day for weeks on end throughout the world proved otherwise. If we look back at Donald and John Purcell that was here the other week, and they were talking about their ministries, they talked a lot about the goodness of God and shared stories of the miraculous healings they've seen and the deliverance they've seen in people through their ministry. And being to those different things, it made me kind of look over the prayers I've had answered in my own life, and also some of the prayers that I'm still holding out for, that, I know God is a God of yes and amen, but just now I haven't seen the fruition of those prayers, but I hold on to them. So with that in mind, today I want to talk about some of the miracles that are documented in the Bible, from the Old Testament through to the New. So I have a question, because I like a little bit of audience participation to see if you are all listening to me. So do you know how many miracles are recorded in the Bible? Pardon? How many are recorded? Does anybody know? You can shout out an idea, an example. Pardon? No, because you'll get the answer maybe, Dot. That's cheating. So there's 120 miracles recorded in the Bible. Now my next question is, do you know how many were delivered by Jesus in the Gospels? Anyone like Evie like to take a stab? How many miracles do you think Jesus delivered in the Bible? Say a number. Pardon? 40? Oh, you are really close. 37 was what he did. But I want to look at one miracle in particular to begin with from the Old Testament. And if we go all the way back to Genesis, we can see the power of God, where he spoke the world into being and he created Adam and Eve. He blessed Abraham's wife Sarah. She'll be able to fall pregnant with his son Isaac. He then healed Isaac's wife so she could fall pregnant with Esau and Jacob. I could literally probably sit here and run through the genealogy in Genesis all morning and talk about the miracles that God delivered to the people there. But there's one person in particular I want to kind of look at from the Old Testament. And this year I've set myself the challenge to read the whole Bible by the end of the year. And I'm 120 days in so far, and they say it takes, 30 days to start a habit and keep it. So, I've done that kind of 4 times over, so I'm quite impressed. But over the last few months, I've been following the story of Moses through Exodus, Leviticus, Deuteronomy, and Numbers. So, who was Moses? So Moses was known for being a prophet of the Lord. The story of Moses began in the book of Exodus. The descendants of Joseph started to increase in numbers in the land of Egypt, and the Pharaoh at the time was worried they would try and take power to enslave them all. He can come up, he was part of the Israelites, really, He's welcome to be part of this story. Caleb, Bear's more than welcome to as well. So, at the time Moses was born, Pharaoh decided that all male Israelite babies should be killed to prevent them from growing up and coming against the Egyptian power. Moses' poor mother was probably terrified, so like any good mother, she tried to hide him and conceal him from the Egyptians for a few months, but she got to the point she couldn't do it anymore, so she set him adrift in a basket along the River Nile, hoping a miracle from God would save him. So Moses floated down the river, and I think it's probably quite a terrifying experience as a baby. You know, a few months old, you're maybe moving about a little bit. Like my Caleb's wanting to chase about and come over to me. So, you know, setting a baby off in a basket, it's risky, shall we say? But Moses floated down to the river where Pharaoh's daughter was bathing. She saw his basket in the reeds and sent a slave to rescue him. And the princess felt really sorry for him and decided to raise him as her own son. And she named him Moses, which means drawn out. So one day after Moses had grown up, he saw an Egyptian treating an enslaved Israelite really badly. And seeing this, Moses lost his temper. And in losing his temper, he killed the Egyptian. And Pharaoh heard what Moses did, and he had desire to go and kill Moses. But Moses was able to flee the country and found refuge in Midian. So whilst living in Midian, Moses rescued the daughters of a high priest, and as a token of the gratitude, he was given one of them in marriage. And Moses lived happily as a shepherd in Midian for 40 years. So you're thinking he was probably a fair age. He was older than me by that point. And one day, Moses witnessed a burning bush that wasn't consumed by the fire. He heard the voice from God who asked him to save the people who were still enslaved in Egypt and to then lead them to the promised land. And, you know, Moses probably tried a tactic that I'm very good at and I've probably used a lot throughout my life. You know, probably something my mum and dad could say, yeah, you did say that a lot. And I know Mary can say, I've definitely said this to her. But, you know, he used the tactic, he said, why me? He said, why can't you pick somebody else? Why can't somebody else do it? You know, Moses didn't think he was an eloquent speaker. You know, he thought there was probably a lot of other people better than him. But God had a plan for Moses, and he picked Moses. So Moses went with his brother Aaron and with the power of God to help him convince Pharaoh to set the Israelites free, and also convince Pharaoh that he was speaking from God. So Moses returned to Egypt and asked Pharaoh to free the enslaved Hebrew people. Pharaoh wasn't happy with his request and said no. And this really angered God, who sent plagues to Egypt, each time giving Pharaoh a chance to concede to let his people go. Each time Pharaoh refused, all in all, God sent 10 plagues to the land of Egypt. Now, kids, I've got a question for you. There was 10 plagues sent to the land of Egypt. Can you name them? Doesn't have to be in order. So there's no pressure. Yep, frogs, that was one of them, yep. Locusts, yep. Flies, yep. What did you say, Ella? Gnats, yep. Pardon? Death of cows. So I'll read them out to you. So the 10 plagues were water turning to blood, frogs, then lice, then a plague of flies, then livestock pestilence, boils, hail, locusts, darkness, and then the final one was the death of the firstborn Egyptian child. And the 10th plague was the one that made Pharaoh eventually free the enslaved people. When the people left Egypt, guess what? Pharaoh's heart had hardened even more to the point that he regretted letting them go. And he wanted them back because he wanted his slaves to be able to do things for him. So he sent out his army to retrieve them. And God protected the Israelites as they traveled and kept Pharaoh away until Moses reached the Red Sea. The Israelites were terrified and were screaming out to God and being rather unkind to Moses for taking them out of Egypt. So you think you've spent the best part of your life as a slave, being treated poorly, probably not being fed well, not looked after, not really cared for at all. and they were desperate to go back. But God has other plans, has bigger plans for them. And Moses saw that. And this is for me, kids, this is where the story gets really good. And I'm going to look for a couple of volunteers to come up in a second. And this is where we see one of my favorite miracle from the Old Testament, where God protected his people from Pharaoh. So could I have some volunteers to come up with me? Are you coming up and helping me? Pardon? That's fine. You can help me with number 1, right? Are you coming up, Ayla? So I'm going to take this with me. So I'm going to come over here. So are you going to come up, Daisy? Will you come up here and stand with Ayla? So here's my wee Blue Peter moment. Here's the Red Sea that I created earlier. It's pretty good, you know. Spent a few hours on this. I was out there with my blue paint. They painted all the stones in the back garden as well. But yeah, so obviously the Israelites are scared. Can you look scared for me? Do you could turn around and show everybody what a scared face looks like? You could just turn around and look like you're looking. Look at that, scared. So scared. So right, who wants to be Moses? Daisy, do you want to be Moses? Yeah? So I'm going to read the Bible. And in Exodus 14:21 it says, right, then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea. So can you stretch out your hand like Moses? And all that, can you stretch out your hand like that? And all that night the Lord drove the sea back with a strong east wind and turned it into dry land. So as he held it out, this is where I need Leah, my other wonderful volunteer. Oh, I've got Evie, it's fine. So as he held the hand out, guess what happened? The sea parted. And there was dry land in between. And then, do you want to be the Israelites? You can walk through. So you're coming through the sea. Just think you're walking through a big wall of water. There's maybe fish on the side of you, do you think? Maybe a wee jellyfish here. So do you want to walk through like the Israelites and walk to me? So come on then. So they walked through, and the Egyptians were hot on their tail at that point, and they were the Israelites were still scared. So you got your scared face. Oh no, I'm scared. And then, what did Moses do then? So in verse 26-28 it says, then the Lord said to Moses, stretch out your hand over the sea. So you stretch out your hands again. So the waters may flow back over the Egyptians and their chariots and horsemen. Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and at daybreak the sea went back into its place. Oh wow, now you're on the other side. The sea is in there. The Egyptians were fleeing towards it, and the Lord swept them into the sea. The water flowed back and covered the chariots and horsemen. The entire army of Pharaoh that had followed the Israelites into the sea, not one of them had survived. So they didn't make it, and all the Israelites were safe on this side of the sea. So thank you very much. You can go take a seat. You can have a wee bow. There you go. Lovely. So that is one of my favorite stories from the Old Testament where God led Moses and the Israelites, and there's lots of good stories from Moses. I'm going to just share a little bit more about Moses. So Moses went on to lead the Israelites, who were now free but had nowhere to live. God provided them with food and water, and even allowed their clothing not to wear out for a very long time. Moses struck his staff on the rock to make water come. God made sure when they woke up that they found white food that tasted like honey on the ground, and a bird called a quail to eat. I did contemplate taking one of my quail in, but I had the fear that it would fly off and it'd be stuck living here for a while. And when they needed water, Moses could strike his staff on the rock to make it flow. So Moses went on to lead the Israelites. They were now free, but traveling across the desert with nowhere to live. God had not forgotten the Israelites, though. He provided them with many amazing ways. He made bitter water sweet, brought them to an oasis in Elim, where there were 12 springs of water and 70 palm trees, and then had Moses strike a rock of water came gushing out. God also fed the Israelites with white food, as I said, and they found on the ground in the morning, which tasted like honey, and a bird called quail to eat in the evening. The Israelites traveled for months on foot to Mount Sinai, where God asked Moses to meet him at the top. Moses climbed up in a thunderstorm and waited for God. God descended in fire and smoke and gave Moses 10 important laws known as the 10 Commandments that would tell his people how to live. Now, I'm putting you all on the spot again, and I know that you all know this. Could you sing us the 10 Commandments song? And I'm sure Anna would love to help you. Thank you. Leah and Rosie can do a solo at the end. Thank you, kids. That was very nice. So we can find more about Moses in Leviticus, Deuteronomy, and Numbers, which are all found in the Old Testament, which is the first section of the Bible, kids. It's especially interesting to read through some of the obstacles and challenges the Israelites overcame in their journey to reach the Promised Land, which was eventually achieved during Joshua's leadership, that's where I'm at now. That's something that you can go away and have a look at yourselves. So the parting of the Red Sea was a great miracle demonstrated through God to protect us and keep his people safe. Even when to Moses and the Israelites it looked like everything was lost, God stepped in and guided Moses and helped him protect the people. So that is our first miracle that I want to look at from the Old Testament. So I spoke about a really special guy earlier from the New Testament, Evie, really close, 37 miracles through the Gospels. And there's so many good examples of miracles that Jesus performed. And I did consider taking 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish to see if I could make it stretch out for lunch. But I didn't quite have the faith that I could pull it off and didn't really want to look a fool. So I'm passing you a wee crumb of bread. Instead, I want to look at the first miracle that Jesus performed. So can somebody help me? I'm going to get a few volunteers to help me see if we can demonstrate the first miracle that Jesus performed. I've got a clue. I've got water and 2 bottles. So I'm going to have a shot first. And we're going to see if I can perform Jesus' first miracle. So let's see. Can we do it without spilling it on the floor? No. Is anything happening? Babe, is anything happening to this water? No. Does somebody want to come up and help me? Are you going to help me? Well, you can help me on the next one, okay? I'll get one of the bigger girls to help me just now. Elle, come on, you help me. You pour this in and see if we can do anything with it. Nah, still nothing. I must be doing something wrong. It's meant to be doing something. This is quite embarrassing, isn't it? Stand in front of all these people saying I'm going to do something cool and I can't do it. Oh, no. That's twice now. Oh. Right, we'll have one more shot, right? So, will you come with me a second? Right, let's go over here. You can help me pour it, right? We'll stand here, right? You help me pour it. You hold it for me, right? We'll pour it. Oh, no, not again. Oh, not again. Wait. I've still done nothing. Wait, I think it needs a kid's touch. I'm going to see. Jing, you could shake it really hard. Okay. And if you shake it, you shake it as hard as you can. See if it does anything. Quick. What's happened? Oh, wow. What colour's that? Purple. It went purple. How did it turn purple? Bear, you've got the touch. High five me, my man. So, I'll tell you in a second. You go have a seat, right, and I'll tell you, right? So, I didn't perform a miracle like Jesus here. I performed a wee trick. So, Ayla, it was a wee trick that I performed. And I was just pouring the water into the bottles, and there's nothing in the water to make it turn colour. But what I did, I snuck something in the lid. So when I went over there, I swapped the lid, and I put some food colouring in it, which then changed the colour of the water. So yeah, where was I? So I did a perfect trick. I just took some plain water and added it to a water where I snuck something into it. There's no miracle here. I just used this as a demonstration to make us think about the first miracle that Jesus performed. So with that, do you know what I want to talk about? What the first miracle Jesus performed was? It was at the wedding, but what did he do at the wedding? Yeah, he turned water into wine. He did. So let's turn to John 2 and read the story of where Jesus turned water into wine. So on the third day, a wedding took place at Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, "They have no more wine." "Woman, why do you involve me?" Jesus replied. "My hour has not come yet." His mother said to his servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Nearby stood 6 stone water jars, the kind used by the Jews for ceremonial washing, each holding from 20 to 30 gallons. Jesus said to the servants, "Fill the jars with water." So they filled them to the brim. And then he told them, "Now draw out and take it to the master of the banquet." Just going to grab a drink. If you've already drunk this, it's clean and sanctified in Jesus' name, isn't it? So where did we get to? So the master of the banquet tasted the water that had been turned into wine. He did not realize where it had come from, though the servant who had drawn the water knew. Then he called the bridegroom and said, "Everyone brings out the choice wine first, and then the cheaper wine after the guests have had too much to drink. But you have saved the best till now." What Jesus did here in Cana of Galilee was the first of the signs through which he revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. After this, he went down to Capernaum, pardon my pronunciation if that's wrong, with his mother and brothers and his disciples. There they stayed for a few days. So in this story, Jesus showed his glory and power to his disciples. Jesus made a point to his mother saying now was not the time, but he did so anyway. And this was the first miracle that Jesus performed that his disciples witnessed. Jesus didn't perform miracles to become popular or well-liked. He performed miracles to show that he was the Son of God who had saved them. So notice that if anyone drank my purple water, it probably wouldn't taste very good. I'm not asking you to try it, so it's okay. However, in this Bible account of Jesus' first miracle, the man in charge of the feast tastes the wine Jesus made and says it is the best he has tasted of the night. He tells the bridegroom that normally people bring out the rubbish wine this late in the celebrations, as people have already had too much to drink, which would make them less likely to notice poor quality wine. But at this wedding, the best wine was saved for last. Jesus performed many miracles throughout his life. He healed the sick. He raised the dead. Could probably demonstrate it here. He walked on water. And he fed the 5,000 with 5 loaves and 2 fish. These miracles could not be explained by a simple trick. These were real life-changing miracles. So life-changing that the disciples and many others were willing to give up everything they had, even their very lives, to follow Jesus. The disciples were there with Jesus. They knew that he was the real deal, and they were willing to die for his truth, telling people about how amazing Jesus is and how to be saved. So we learn a lot about Jesus and therefore God's character through his miracles. These miracles were a witness to who Jesus said he was. He told the Jews that if they did not believe that he was the Christ, then they should believe the works he had done as they bear witness of him. Jesus also said, "If you've seen me, then you have seen the Father, and I and the Father are one." His miracles show us the compassion Jesus had for people. He did not want to see them suffering unnecessarily. For example, when he healed the leper, Jesus healed the paralyzed man because of the faith of his friends. He often states faith is the reason for healing. You've obviously spoken about that today as well, Manny. This reminds us to have faith in God for the miraculous. Miracles are demonstrated the close relationship Jesus had with God. His Father, Jesus said, he only did what he saw the Father do, showing that these miracles were not only an expression of the nature of Jesus, but the nature of our God. We need to have a similar relationship with God in our lives, letting the Father guide us and navigate us in our walk, doing as we see him do. Paul said, "Imitate me as I imitate Christ." Our walk should look like Jesus. Do people see Jesus when they look at you? Do you reflect in the nature and character of God? Something to think over as we go through this week. And we all want to see change in our life. And sometimes we want something really, really big that just seems so far out of reach and could only come through the form of a miracle. We need to take hold of the wise words from Jesus in Matthew 17. So after healing a sick boy, which his disciples failed to heal, Jesus told them, "Truly I tell you, if you have faith the size of a mustard seed, you can say to the mountain, 'Move from here to there,' and it will move, and nothing will be impossible for you." And if we hold on to those words, it's a big statement. And if we look at things we want to see change in our life, it's just a tiny, tiny little seed that we need to have the faith for. And we can see the miraculous. But there's so many times in my life where I've wanted things and thought I have that level of faith, but I haven't seen anything come from it. So I know there's more I need to do more and probably improve at that time my relationship with God. But the most important miracle of all was when Jesus died to pay our debt of sin. He was buried and rose from the dead on the third day. We just recently celebrated that back in Easter. And because of that miracle, our sin is forgiven and forgotten. I often think to myself, would more people believe in God or Jesus if they saw a miracle? And sometimes I think, no, they probably wouldn't. Pharaoh saw the power of God back in the Old Testament through Moses, but he was unrepentant and hardened his heart and didn't believe it. And you think of all the people that saw Jesus perform miracles, a lot of them refused to believe him, and they weren't willing to give their life to him. And where I'm going with this, I guess my advice to you is, don't let that be true of you. Accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior. And for me, the greatest miracle is the miracle of a changed life. This can happen if we open our hearts and lives to Jesus. I look at me before I accepted Jesus. I was probably quite selfish. I was probably quite self-centered. But I'm truly grateful for the work that God has done in me and continues to do in me. And I think it's nothing short of a miracle that I'm actually standing here in front of a camera, in front of all you guys, sharing the good news of Jesus. So God is still a God of miracles, from small ones to big ones. Regardless of where you are today, God is there and always has been waiting, calling you by name because he loves you, because he knew you before you were formed in your mother's womb. God wants you to follow him and step into a relationship where you will see his goodness through his perfect plan for your life. God is a designer, he's a creator, and he's made you for a specific purpose that only you can fill. Mary can't fulfill it, I can't fulfill it, Roy can't fulfill it. He's made a purpose direct for you that only you can fill. And you will see that God is a God of miracles. So I know my message has probably been quite short today, but I'm going to share a song with you. It's not mine, but it's a song that really hit home when I first listened to it. It's not often like, and I'll say you're talking rubbish now. So it's not often a song makes me emotional. It probably is. I get quite emotional through music, but I really like music. But it's a song that really hit home because how grateful I am for God and what He's done in my life and where I was to where I am now. And I'm thankful for everything that God has done, even to the point when I was a prodigal son, lost in the wilderness. His goodness still covered me through prayers of people holding out for my salvation. So I'm going to share a song, but I would really like it if my two little girls would come and sing it with me. I will promise I'll probably play a few bum chords, so be forgiving.